Last week I showed you the start of fulfilling a lifelong dream for me, and that's the construction of a pond on my property. We've teamed up with the good folks over at Aquascape and Easton Outdoors to make this dream a reality. And in that video, I showed you everything that happened on day one of the build. As I said in that video, I was completely shocked at what they accomplished in just one day. They showed up at 9:30 in the morning because their shop is an hour and a half away from us, and by lunchtime, Jim, Donny, and Christian already had the hole dug, the liner in, and they were setting the rocks on the bottom. By the end of the first day, they had all the big rocks set on the bottom layer, and they even had one of the main features done, which is a huge stone right on the edge that we'll be able to stand on, and it overlooks the water. Okay, I'm being dramatic saying it overlooks the water, but it feels that way. Jim designed a really cool fish cave under that large stone, so it serves two purposes. It'll be where I stand to feed the fish, and it's also a cave the fish can retreat to if there's a threat coming from above. And let me tell you, this is going to be an absolute necessity. Before this pond was even done, I already saw 3 hawks soaring over the house checking things out. We live in the country, so there's plenty of predators out there looking for a meal. We've got bears not far from us in the woods across the fields, according to my neighbors. I've never seen them, but everyone says they're there. I'm not really concerned with the bears or coyotes, which are also common out here, because they have to travel a long way to get to us. Not saying it can't happen, just saying I won't lay awake at night worrying about them. But what I will lose sleep over is the predators that fly in the air. It's not uncommon to see hawks, eagles, and vultures flying overhead. Thankfully, Jim designed the cave for the fish to retreat, and that's not the only one. He made a second cave that's smaller and a little more hidden on the other side. So hopefully that's all we need to keep the fish in the water and not in birds' bellies. Anyway, once that bottom layer was done, they got to work on the top layer, which is the stones that not only contain the pond, but also serve as the edge treatment for it. So they took extra time to make sure they fit nicely, they're super secure, and they can be stepped on. Once they got this top layer on, it was time to get to the real fun stuff, which is building the waterfall. Or should I say, all the waterfalls. Yes, this pond ends up having 4 waterfalls. They might not be huge waterfalls that drop 10 feet down, but hey, there's 4 of them. As I was watching this thing come together from the very beginning, I gotta be honest, it was pretty difficult to know exactly how this thing was going to turn out in the end. Jim would explain his vision to me and I'd be like, alright, that sounds cool, but I still didn't really know. I just had to trust him, which wasn't hard to do because this guy's an expert and I've seen other ponds he's done, so I'm not worried about whether or not it's going to be nice in the end. To give you an example, when the hole was dug, I was like, man, this thing is huge. It's like a swimming pool. But once the rocks go in it and take up a lot of that space, you end up with a finished product that's way smaller than the opening. I am totally fine with that because filling the hole with rocks looks way better than just a hole in the ground. But what I'm saying is what you think it's going to look like and what it actually ends up looking like is 2 completely different things. Unless you're the person building it with the vision in your head. Well, when Jim explained the concept of the waterfall to me, it kind of made sense, but he was talking about the water coming down here, then turning and going around the stacked slate sphere, then falling down again into the pond, and I was like, okay, I trust you. While Jim was building the waterfall and Donny was helping him move the huge rocks into place, Christian was going around the edge of the pond taking care of the excess liner and backfilling behind all the rocks. This is another example of these guys working as a team and not having to be told what to do. There's no standing around. They know exactly what needs to be done and they just do it. It's a beautiful thing to watch. As the waterfall starts to take shape, you see the large sphere in the center. Well, I mentioned this briefly in the first video, but this was an awesome surprise. I had no idea this was part of the deal. It was something Micah decided to surprise me with, and he threw it in. I've seen these types of water features before from Aquascape. They have several different designs and they're really cool because the water pumps up through them and then cascades down all around the sphere. It's a super cool effect, and most people that have these have them completely on their own, just using it as an independent water feature. What I've never seen is one of these incorporated in the pond. And when Jim explained his idea with it, again, I was like, whatever you say, my friend. But I couldn't really see it. I was thinking to myself, we've got all these natural rocks and you're spending all this time trying to make it look like they're part of the scape and set naturally, but then you're going to put this obviously man-made sphere in the center. I'm sure it'll look good, but I don't know. Well, let me just tell you, when you see the finished product, you're going to have the same reaction I did. You're going to say, oh yeah, that works. So obviously the waterfall starts at the highest point. This highest point was made from dirt we got from two different places. The first was from the hole they dug, but unfortunately that wasn't enough, so they had to call in a dump truck load of fill dirt from a local company. This allowed them to build it up high enough to make everything work while also being able to grade it after the project was done so it didn't look like a huge volcano in the middle of the yard. I grew up in Virginia and there's no such thing as a flat piece of land up there. I always dreamed of having a dead nuts flat piece of land and had to move to North Carolina to get it. Having flat land is great until you want to do something like this. Then you have to make your own slopes. So now we're getting to the best part, the part where everything starts coming together and looking like the finished product. The fellas threw literal tons of gravel throughout the pond to cover the bottom, fill the gaps between the rocks, and again, give it a natural look. They used pea gravel that was about nickel size and also larger stones to mix things up. This gravel, along with the larger stones, let me tell you, are super dirty. So once they all start going in and we start putting water in it, it was basically a huge mud puddle. That's easy enough to resolve though. They filled the pond up with maybe a foot of water and then took a huge pump and pumped it all out. Filled it up again a little more and drained it out again, and then filled it up one last time. Just as you'd expect, even after rinsing it a couple times, there was still a little haze to the water, but honestly, what can you expect? I was surprised it wasn't dirtier than it was. As the pond was filling up, the guys were still running around, setting more stones up on top of the hill, tucking in the liner, and grading the area to smooth everything out. I gotta be honest, when it was around 5 or 6 o'clock, I was thinking there's no way they're gonna finish this thing today. I mean, here's what it looked like around that time. I even asked Jim and he said, I don't know. And I said, hey listen, don't stress. I'm not under any deadlines here. If you need to finish this another day, it's not going to hurt me at all. And his response was, well, we'll see how things go. Well, as they got into a groove and things started coming together in a mad rush there at the end, they had a decision to make. Do we bail out and come back tomorrow, or just stay here a couple more hours, bust our asses, and get it done? I think it's pretty clear what they decided to do. They just buckled down, worked in the pitch black dark, and got it done. And at almost 10 p.m., we fired it up for the first time.
Well, folks, 2 days.
Listen to that.
Now let me show you what I was talking about with the 4 waterfalls. The water starts at the biofalls, comes out into a small pool before it drops down to the lower pool. Because of the shape of the rocks, the water splits in 2 directions. The main waterfall on the left and the little one on the right. I was absolutely thrilled when I saw this. It's totally something that would happen in a real stream, and it doesn't look like it's man-made at all. Something else to mention about these waterfalls is while it was being built, Jim asked if I had any moss anywhere. I said, well, I've got 6 200-year-old sycamore trees that have moss growing around the bottom, and he said, Let's go grab some. We gathered up a bunch of this moss and he placed it around the waterfall in areas you'd most likely see it growing naturally. Just another small detail that makes this thing super special. Now to the main waterfall. The water from the first small waterfall travels around the back of the sphere just like Jim said and falls on the opposite side of it. This is another time where when I saw the weir stone that he was using for the main waterfall, I was like, I don't know. Isn't it supposed to be perfectly flat so the water falls straight down almost like a sheet? But I trusted Jim's vision and I'm so glad I did. This totally looks like something that would have happened naturally and it looks awesome. Hats off to Jim. It takes a special eye to see that kind of detail just from looking at a rock. Now I know what you must be thinking. John, you've been saying all along there's 4 waterfalls. I only see 3. Are you counting the sphere as its own waterfall? Well, I could, but no. There's another surprise one right in front of it. There's a small gap just in front of the sphere that's created another super cool little waterfall that, if I'm being honest, might be my favorite one out of all of them. I asked Jim if he planned it that way, and of course he was like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen, but I also remember him quoting Bob Ross earlier in the day and said, "There's no mistakes, only happy accidents." I personally believe, whether Jim wants to admit it or not, this is one of those happy accidents, and I absolutely love it. So here we are, the next day. Just look at this thing. Yeah, there's still a lot of work to do because the pond is just the beginning. We've still got to add plants, maybe a small bench on the side and plant grass seed, and that'll all be done in future videos. But look what I have in my yard now. We started 2 days ago with just a piece of flat ground beside our porch to now having a stunning water feature that is the realization of a lifelong dream for me. I could not be happier, and even writing this script 2 weeks after the pond went in, I still tell Lisa every day when we're out there looking at it, I can't believe this is in our yard. To say thank you to Aquascape and Easton Outdoors isn't even close to expressing my gratitude to them. Aquascape is one of the leading providers of pond equipment, education, and construction, so if you want to look into them, I'll have a link to their site and YouTube channel in the description. And if you're in the Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area of Virginia and you want to get a pond built, I could not recommend Easton Outdoors more. And I'm not saying this because they're my friends and want to pump them up. I met Micah for the first time when he came to my house to do the consult and met Jim for the first time when he pulled into my driveway to build the thing. I'm recommending them because they're amazing at what they do and I plan on seeing them a lot more in the future. If you're in the Hampton Roads area in Virginia, you can get Easton Outdoors information down in the description, but if you're not in the area, there'll also be a link to the Aquascape Certified Contractors all over the country. They've pretty much got contractors everywhere, so if you want a pond like this with all the equipment you've seen in this video, that's where you'll find it. Oh yeah, the equipment. We'll talk about that in a future video too. Maybe that'll be a good video for the spring when we do a nice spring cleaning after this thing's been running for a while. Now there's one last thing to talk about before we end this, and it's a pretty important part of the project. The fish. I've had a lot of ideas for pond fish over the years of dreaming about this thing. I've thought about clearing out our local Petco of feeder fish, but someone else, I'm not going to name names, just did that. I've thought about cichlids, but I'm not far enough south to really be able to sustain them year round, and then of course I've thought about koi. I don't think anyone would argue with me when I say that koi are one of the most amazing fish in all of the fish keeping hobby. I certainly love them. But when Micah from Easton Outdoors was here for our consult, we had an interesting conversation. He mentioned that he frequently runs into fish that are in need of rescue. It could be that these fish are in an abandoned pond, maybe they're fish with defects that people want to get rid of, or it could be someone that's moving and they need to break the pond down before they move. When Lisa heard fish with defects, she was like, that's it. Our pond needs to be for rescues. So that's what we're gonna do. And at the moment of recording this, I just heard from Micah, and he's got a lead on some fish that need rescuing right now. So that's what we're doing. Subscribe if you want to see that. Thank you so much for going on this dream journey with me. This pond is the beginning of the next chapter of this hobby for us. I am so glad to have been able to share this with you, and I can't wait to show you how things go in the future. To wrap this up and put a bow on it, I'll have Micah from Easton Outdoors close us out.
If you can't tell by how stoked I am, there's much more to this story coming very soon. We just put some fish in the pond, and pretty soon you guys are going to see some videos on John's channel and also on our channel, Easton Outdoors. Thanks, Greg Whitstock, for sponsoring this build. Get outside, my friends.